Good morning. My name's Peter Lloyd and this is my brother Duncan.
Hi there.
And we are at Coriole Vineyards on this beautiful spring morning, and we're going to be looking at a few of our reserve Shiraz wines that are due for release in 2 weeks' time.
Both single vineyards, and both are from very old vines here in McLaren Vale, but different vineyards in different parts of the region, so quite contrasting in their style. So yeah, very interesting to look at the variation that we have across McLaren Vale.
The Lloyd Shiraz, Lloyd Reserve Shiraz, has been produced at Coriole as a single vineyard wine since 1989, and prior to that it was the main component of the Shiraz wines from Coriole from 1970 onwards, and it's from a very old vineyard. Originally thought planted in 1919, but now we realise planted much earlier than that. Probably sometime around the 1860, 1865, the same time as the buildings were built here on the estate, and the mulberry tree was planted and the carob tree was planted, and it's just a lovely piece of history, really, and our top performing, or one of our top performing vineyards, and a little bit different to the rest of the vineyards on the Coriole estate. Has slightly deeper, richer soil, being at the bottom of the hillside. When Shiraz was originally planted 150 years ago, irrigation wasn't an option, and so Shiraz was always planted at the bottom of the hillsides where it was richer, deeper, and Grenache, being more drought tolerant, was planted further up the hill. And then the Willunga 1920 Shiraz, planted in 1920 in Willunga, so the very southern part of McLaren Vale, whereas we're in the northern part on the estate here, and the soil type is quite different in that vineyard.
Yeah, a little bit more sort of loamy, a bit more influence from the Willunga hills, and so a little bit more gravelly. Generally, a slightly more open knit wine, whereas the Lloyd Shiraz gives us a lot more depth and sort of savoury tones, and a real drive of tannin, which is really a hallmark of the Lloyd Shiraz.
And that's the reason that we typically release the Lloyd with an extra year of bottle age. So the Willunga 1920 is 2019 vintage, and the Lloyd Shiraz is 2018 vintage. We really love to just give it a little bit of extra maturity prior to release. 2018 was a very small vintage. We had good rainfall at the start of the season, and then it really dried off, and we actually had quite a cold spring, poor fruit set, and but we just didn't really get much rain at the tail end of spring or into summer, so it was quite dry, relatively warm, led to very concentrated wines.
Smaller vintage, but I find all the 2018 wines just have a beautiful balance of tannin and fruit still, and I think instantly looking in the glass here at this 2018 Lloyd, you get a lot of the classic sort of plums and mulberry fruit, but you instantly see that sense of place. There's a sort of ironstone, ferrous character coming through, a lot of sort of savoury notes. And this really is a wine that will sort of develop and change a lot over the next 10, 15 years. It's really about this, for this wine, the density and the fullness on the palate, and just great drive and energy through the whole palate.
Yeah, lovely savoury elements, and a good classic vintage, similar to maybe 2012, 2010. Not as ripe as, say, 2019 or 13, just a lovely degree of savouriness and still elegance and poise. So phenomenal wine, great vintage, and a long time ahead of it in the cellar.
In the winery, they're pretty similar the way we treat these two wines, and they're really just single ferments, fermented in the open fermenters behind us. And we plunge twice daily. We don't have to work them too hard. We naturally get quite a bit of extraction and fullness out of our wines, and then go into oak for about 18 months before bottling. We typically use a fairly small percentage of new oak. So again, because of our quite sort of savoury nature, we only sit around 25% new oak for these wines, and both exclusively French hogsheads.
Next up is the Willunga 1920 Reserve Shiraz. So this has been part of our range now as a top flight wine, second year. But that has been 20 or 30 years in the making. It was a vineyard that our family came into ownership of around 30 years ago. And at that stage, it was an old vineyard, but it wasn't a good vineyard. It really just produced our lowest quality level. But we did see the potential, and thankfully we didn't pull it out. And just slowly over time have reconstructed the vineyard, built it back up to a really lovely open, even trellis, and returned it to an organic system. And it has, over the last 10 years, has really just every year has inched up a notch. And now we typically see it as on par, albeit a different style, we see it as on par quality-wise with our Lloyd Reserve Shiraz. So it's just lovely to be able to show both, because they are very different styles.
Yeah, very contrasting. Often one of our first Shiraz blocks to come in here at Coriole, all hand-picked. And yeah, instantly on the nose, I see still a lot of that, berry fruit, but probably a bit more of a sort of a violet lavender lift, a little bit less of the savouriness that we see in the Lloyd Reserve, and just beautiful plushness and richness of fruit on the palate, still with a lot of elegance, and just a finer tannin structure than compared to the Lloyd.
Even though they are very old vineyards, they are very robust and produce moderate quantities. I mean, these probably crop at around 2 tonnes to the acre, so it's relatively low cropping, but highly concentrated, really powerful wines.
So, yeah, 2 single vineyard wines, a great contrast between the two, which really highlights the variation we have in McLaren Vale. I think both of them are really highlighted by their sort of tannin maturity and complexity, but different fruit profiles, and great wines to look at side by side, and 2 great wines to sort of hold into the future as well.
But what do you prefer, Duncan?
Look, it's hard. Glass right now, I'll be drinking the Willunga, but I do think this 18 Lloyd over the next 5 or so years will just be really coming to its own. So look, I'll take the Lloyd home with me tonight.
Very good. 2 really lovely vineyards that we feel pretty lucky to own and to run and to manage, and it's great to be able to get these wines out into the world for other people to enjoy. So thanks very much, and cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.